Hello, my name is Liz, a former fundamentalist Christian turned atheist. In this video, I'm going to share 10 things I deeply regret. Number 1, getting a religious tattoo. This one is definitely smaller than the others, but it's still something I regret. It was very cliche, and I hated it. I hated it almost immediately because it was crooked. The way the tattoo artist had me laying my arm down made it so that my skin was stretched. So when the tattoo was done, it was actually crooked and kind of on an angle on my arm, and that bothered me to no end. I had begun the process to have it removed, but around the sixth session, it looked really bad, like I had taken a knife and carved my tattoo into my skin, and then it got infected, and now I have a scar of my tattoo with little, very faint bits of ink. And so it was very cliche. It said love. Underneath it said 1 Corinthians 13:13. And I had actually drawn up a custom O that was this interwoven heart like this. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. 1 Corinthians 13:13. This passage is used a lot in weddings. That is not the correct context for this passage. I did have the correct context in mind when I got this. But even so, I still got a lot of questions at people in my Christian college because they all thought they were super smart because, like me, they knew the real context of this verse and it not being about love in the way people think about. But I did have the right context in mind. And so this whole passage, which is typically used in weddings and talking about the love you would have with a spouse, it's really talking about the love that God has for us and the love that we are supposed to have as Christians to our fellow Christians and also to non-believers. And so the passage is all about you can have all of these amazing spiritual gifts, but if you don't have that true love for the hurting and the broken in your heart, that all of that really amounts to nothing. And so for me, the tattoo was meant to be a reminder to, above all things, love God, love my fellow believers, and love the people and the humans around me. Now, I hate it because I've got this weird scar on my forearm. Most of the time, people don't even notice, but when they do notice, then it it turns into the whole explanation of why I have the tattoo and why I got it removed. So it's just awkward. I wish I had never done it. Also, and when I had done it, I was in college and I went home on Christmas break, and my mom was so upset and so disgusted by it that I was sitting down at Christmas. We had the fire going. It was very hot in the living room. But she leaves, she comes back and hands me a sweater to put on so that the tattoo is covered because she just can't bear to look at it. Because she feels like tattoos are an unchristian thing to have. She also told me that it doesn't matter what it says, that it'll always be a sign of rebellion. Okay, Mom. My Bible verse tattoo is a sign of rebellion. All right. And that actually wasn't the first time she told me I ruined Christmas. Number 2. I think this one is a pretty common shared regret, and that's purity culture. I also like to think of it as sexual prosperity gospel. This teaching that if you are good and humble and modest. You don't have any sex before marriage. You do everything the right way. You don't date, you court, and everything's very formal. That your marriage is going to be blessed, that everything is going to be perfect, and that the sex is going to be great. I was the generation where Joshua Harris was huge, and for a couple of years during my teens, my mom would make me read I Kissed Dating Goodbye at the end of every summer before I went back to school. And that when I was done with high school, then I could read his second book, Boy Meets Girl, Say Hello to Courtship. I Kissed Dating Goodbye was published in 1997, and in 2016, Joshua Harris apologized to all of the people who had been hurt by his book and disavowed its content and discontinued its publication. And in July of 2019, he revealed that he no longer considered himself a Christian. But this was the model, the gold standard of how we were supposed to behave as Christians and how we were supposed to date. It made dating extremely awkward at my Christian college. No one would ever go on dates. They would hang out or go to coffee. And then after you had been hanging out for a really long time, then you would have the DTR, the define the relationship. And this conversation, instead of just being a, hey, are we or are we not dating? It was really a, hey, are we going to pursue marriage together or not? And when you were ready to pursue marriage together, then you officially started dating. But until then, it would be so awkward because guys would never frame it as you were going out on a date. I had this one guy who was sending these crazy mixed signals my freshman year. He would ask me repeatedly to hang out. And then every fifth or sixth hangout, a little bit after, I would get messages about, hey, from him saying, hey, I think we're spending too much time together. You know, it's not appropriate. It's not holy. And I would be like, okay. But then he would keep asking me to hang out. And eventually I confronted him on it and I was like, what's up? Are you interested or something? And his response was, yes, I have you and three other girls in prayerful consideration. And I told him, well, you can count me out. I actually found out who all three other girls were. In that conversation, he had straight admitted that one of the girls was his ex, who he had actually slept with. And so he felt that that was probably the most appropriate since they were, you know, soul bonded from that. But, you know, she had broken up with him. And he, as a Christian, felt guilt that he had lost his purity. The second girl was a very good friend of mine. And so when this guy started asking her to hang out regularly, I told her immediately the conversation that I had had with him. And so she told him very quickly she wasn't interested. And then the next girl he started pursuing was a friend of my friend, and she warned her. Number three, I regret not speaking up for myself and others when I saw injustice and abuse happening. It was very much drilled into me that when something bad happens, you turn the other cheek. You forgive. And so there are people in my life who I repeatedly allowed them to mistreat me, abuse me, and use me. And as I also watch them treat others in that same manner, and encouraging and teaching others to turn the other cheek and to forgive. Now, I do still think that forgiveness is important in as far as letting go of the past for yourself so that you're no longer dwelling on it, stewing on it, and making yourself feel worse. But that does not mean keeping that person in your life, trusting them, or remaining on good terms with them. Number 4, I regret encouraging others to be more radical in their faith. I would often preach on the Great Commission, Matthew 28:19 through 20. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And also Acts 1:8, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you.
That's what she said.
And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And the way that I would preach this is that we are all God's disciples, and we all have this great commission and call. Some of us are meant to be witnesses of that gospel in Jerusalem, where we live, Judea, the surrounding area, Samaria, the people that we don't like, that we hate, because the Jews thought Samaritans were filthy, dirty half-breeds who worshipped God wrong, and then to the ends of the earth. And so I encouraged people to evangelize, to try to convert friends, families, strangers, co-workers, whoever. And I deeply regret that now. Number 5, I used to really look up to my mom as a spiritual role model. She would spend an hour or more every morning reading her Bible and praying. She also seemed to have some type of prophetic gift or gift of discernment. She just always seemed to know things, and I used to look up to her a lot. I wanted to be just like her faith-wise when I was older. And I used to trust her entirely when things were revealed to her. There were many times where she was spot on about things. However, I also have a very good intuition. I'm very good at reading people, and I think she was just the same way. Some people have a gift for looking at a situation and instinctually understanding things that might be behind it. But that's not proof of God or proof that God revealed those things to you. One of the times that God revealed something to her that I found out very quickly it was not true was when I was in middle school. I was reading the Harry Potter books. I was borrowing them from a friend, and I would put them in one of those stretchy elastic book covers so she couldn't see what it was, and I would only read it when nobody was watching, and otherwise I would hide it. And she came to me and said that God had revealed to her that I was reading them because Harry Potter was evil and of the devil, and I shouldn't read them. And so I got in trouble and I got punished. I found out about a week. So I returned that book to the friend I had borrowed it from, and I found out about a week later when she confessed that she felt guilty that she was lending me these books that she knew my mom didn't want me to read, and so she told my mom out of her guilt. So, no, Mom, God did not reveal that to you. It was my snitch of a friend. The other thing that really just put a crack in this facade is When I let her know that I was dating my now husband, she was so excited. She opened up her prayer journal to show when she had started praying that God would bring me a spouse. And she was telling me how this was the answer to her prayers. And she was so excited. And she just knew that he was the one and this was right. Fast forward to shortly before my wedding. So everything is planned, everything is paid for. Alex, my now husband, and I go to visit them. And the first night, he gets food poisoning. And so he was up sick all night. And so, understandably, he slept in a bit the next morning. Now, you may or may not know this, but for some reason, a lot of Christians just have this idea that the earlier you wake up, the more productive of a person you are. And if you sleep in, you're lazy. And so she didn't like that. And the whole time we were there, anytime it was just me, she kept saying all of these weird, stupid things like, he's just like your dad, or he looks like a mix of your dad and brother. And she kept projecting qualities and traits on him that were clearly qualities of my dad or my brother. And Alex is nothing like either of them. If you're trying to do a comparison with them, all you're really going to get is that they are men and they are tall and they have similar-ish hair colors, but not. That's it. That is all. The last straw, the real nail in the coffin, was that Alex was upstairs packing his suitcase, and I was sitting on the couch with my mom having a normal conversation, and she just breaks down and starts crying out of nowhere. I ask her, "What's wrong?" She says, "It hurts. It just hurts so much." And so I start asking about things. I bring up something that she had mentioned like a week ago about some pain she was having, because that, in my mind, made the most sense contextually. But no, it wasn't that. She told me that she could hardly sleep last night, that God showed her how difficult my life was going to be now, and it was making her physically ill over it. That she was just so worried about me, and that she just sensed this really awful spirit of procrastination in Alex and I. And I sat there in stunned silence. Because what happened to this being from God, the answer to her prayers, God's chosen spouse for me? And what did she expect me to do? Did she want me to break off my engagement, cancel my wedding a month before it occurred? And Alex has been the kindest, gentlest, most loving person I have ever known in my life. And so all of a sudden, she is implying that this is a bad relationship for me. As soon as Alex got down the stairs, I was like, "Okay, bye, we have to go." And I told him all of it. But I was just so absolutely disgusted at how emotionally manipulative she was being with God's supposed revelation to her about how shit my life was going to be. I was making the wrong choice, taking the wrong path. And that just made me retroactively look back and regret ever trusting her revelations, or that she was really hearing from God. To me, I feel that revealed that it had always been based on her emotions. And yes, she may think that that comes from God, but it doesn't. Number 6, I regret not getting mental health sooner, and that the mental health that I did initially receive was from a Christian counselor. I suffered with depression on and off throughout my life, and usually the treatment was just trusting God more and taking herbal remedies such as St. John's wort, which can boost your mood. If it works for you, then great, I'm glad. However, I have very severe clinical depression. I have been diagnosed by a psychiatrist with major depressive disorder. Drinking some flower tea or taking some flower pill supplements was not what my brain chemistry needed to function. Going through therapy helped me identify things that were unhealthy for me and abusive for me. And so if I had gotten therapy and mental help sooner, I would have been able to avoid more difficulties, more trauma, more pain. Number 7, similar to not getting mental help sooner, I also deeply regret repeatedly pushing my body to the breaking point. I was a workaholic. I defined my self-worth by the things that I could accomplish for others and for Jesus. And so there were several times in India where I would be bedridden ill because I had pushed and pushed and pushed, and my body gave me warning signs, but I ignored them, and I pushed, I pushed, I pushed, and then I got to the point where I couldn't do anything anymore. And I regret treating my body in that way. Because now, as I'm getting older, I have a lot of aches and pains from repeated injuries that I had gotten over time from pushing myself too hard and stressing my body in ways that it really didn't need to be stressed. Number 8, I regret the ways that I emotionally abused my brother. I didn't see it as abuse at the time, but now looking back, I really feel like that's what it was. Now, I was seen very much as super Christian missionary, very bold in my faith, very radical, which my parents greatly approved of. My brother wasn't as into it. And so my parents questioned, and I questioned if he had a real relationship with God. And we worried about his faith, about his salvation. So we would pester him all the time about it. We wouldn't let it rest. And now, especially looking back on my particular trauma, which very much is centered around my parents creating this box of what I should and shouldn't be, and me having to stay within those confines, I was aiding my parents doing the exact same thing to my brother, which, thank goodness, he was not as grossly obedient in that as I was, but it caused him to be constantly berated by me and my mom. I feel like we belittled him by implying that he wasn't good enough. Really creating an environment where he couldn't really feel safe and accepted. Trying to push and force him to share the deep feelings and emotions we assumed he would have had to have. And because of this pushiness, creating a space where he would never feel comfortable to share anything he was feeling. When I told my brother that I had become an atheist, I followed it up with, "I hope you aren't disappointed in me. I know it's a huge change from how and who I used to be." To which he replied, "I am conditioned to be worried and disappointed by that. But you should also know that when you were hardcore, you were always super concerned about my lack of works and faith. Despite the upbringing, I was never fully invested, which was and is its own series of problems with living with them being my parents. I love my brother, and he's the only member of my biological family that I still feel truly comfortable around. I know I can be myself and tell him what I'm really thinking, and so it makes me so upset with myself that I treated him so poorly in the name of saving his soul, making sure his salvation was secured. Number 9, I regret being a god awful stupid bitch the first time I dated Alex, my now husband. I'm not saying that I think we should have gotten married when we initially dated. The first time we dated, we were both freshmen in college, very young, brains not fully developed, both not very aware of what we actually wanted and needed in life. And so I don't regret that it didn't work out at that time, but man, was I horrible. It was this mix of really strong, powerful hormones and lust and the excitement of new, balanced with my relationship with God and the calling I had on my life. And Alex wasn't called to missions, so therefore he wasn't good enough for me, wasn't correct. He didn't fit and check off all of the things that I had decided I needed in a spouse. And so not only was I stupid and broke up with him multiple times, but also spoke to him in a way that must have made him feel lesser because I didn't think he would be a good spiritual leader. I felt that he was wrong for me because he just wasn't as strong of a Christian as I was. Thanks to therapy, I was able to take a serious look at what I actually needed in a partner and realized that Alex was all of that and more than I could have ever imagined. After I got back from India, we were both at a group event playing D&D with some college friends, and we had this moment in that friend's kitchen where we both realized that we still really cared about each other and we were still very much attracted to one another. But neither of us said anything until almost a year later. So, really, we're both idiots. But at least now we're idiots together. And finally, number 10. My last regret is not having more non believing friends. Because I was a missionary, I do have a lot of friends who are Hindu and Buddhist, but I don't really have any atheist or unbelieving friends. I have always been in this Christian bubble and echo chamber. And even when I was in missions, I spent a good chunk of my time with my team who was there for the express purpose of sharing Jesus with people unreached. And so now, especially that I have left the faith, I am deeply regretting not having good friends to be able to talk to and confide in. I don't feel comfortable speaking to a lot of my friends, even the ones that I was really close with, because they are still very religious and they would be disappointed in me and would want to pray for me and try to bring me back to faith. I also, in general, just regret being in that echo chamber and that bubble, closing myself off to other ideas and beliefs and thoughts. I think if I had opened myself up more and sooner, I may have been able to get out sooner and leave before experiencing certain difficulties and pains that I went through. And maybe I would have not gotten to the point where I wanted to end everything because I just did not know what else to do. Now, of course, all of us are products of the things that we've gone through in our life. So I don't really wish to undo any of these things, but they are things that I look back on and I just feel regret or sorrow, anger, or frustration about them. So those are 10 things I deeply regret. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. It really means a lot and I appreciate you.